What if the biggest WNBA rivalry right now isn't actually about who dislikes who? What if it's about what happens when two young stars become so closely compared that every missed shot, every reaction, and every interview suddenly becomes part of the story? That's exactly what happened after the Indiana Fever walked into Atlanta, survived a furious comeback, and left with a 95-91 overtime victory. Clark had 26 points and 9 assists. Angel Reese had 15 points and 14 rebounds. And yet somehow, the box score wasn't even the most talked about part of the night. It was one missed layup, one camera angle, and one reaction that sent social media into another frenzy. And here's where things get interesting. The viral narrative makes it sound like Clark dominated Reese and Reese simply fell apart. But the actual game was much closer than that. Atlanta entered the fourth quarter leading 72-64. Indiana had to erase an 8-point deficit just to force overtime. Reese recorded another double-double, and Atlanta had multiple chances to win before the game finally slipped away. So why did this one loss explode into another chapter of the Clark-Reese rivalry? Because these two players have been compared since college. And now every meeting feels like more than just another WNBA game. And this time, the final seconds gave the internet exactly what it wanted. The Fever were in serious trouble heading into the fourth. Atlanta had controlled large stretches of the game, and Indiana needed somebody to change the momentum. Clark eventually became that player. She finished with 26 points and 9 assists, helping Indiana outscore Atlanta 17-9 in the fourth quarter before the Fever controlled overtime. It wasn't perfect basketball from Clark either. She shot just 3, 4, 10 from 3. That matters, because the story isn't that she walked into Atlanta and magically destroyed everybody. The story is that even without a perfect shooting night, she found other ways to influence the result. She created opportunities, made important plays, and helped Indiana turn a game that looked like an Atlanta win into another Fever victory. And then came the possession that changed the conversation. Atlanta had the ball with the score tied and a chance to win it in regulation. Ryan Howard's attempt didn't fall. Reese grabbed the offensive rebound and immediately had another opportunity near the basket. This was the kind of moment players dream about. One shot, one make, game over. Instead, the putback missed. Atlanta got another chance when Naz Hillman also couldn't finish, and the game went to overtime. That miss became the clip everybody wanted to talk about. Cameras caught Clark smiling shortly afterward, and social media immediately began interpreting the reaction as a sign that she was enjoying Reese's mistake. But there's an important distinction here. Nobody watching a few seconds of footage can know exactly what Clark was thinking. Even coverage of the moment What if one missed shot was enough to reignite the biggest rivalry in the WNBA? Clark and Angel Reese have been compared for years. But after their latest meeting in Atlanta, the conversation exploded again. Clark walked out with the win. Reese walked away with a moment she desperately wanted back. And within hours, fans were turning one possession into a much bigger story. But before we decide what that moment supposedly means, look at what actually happened. Indiana entered the fourth quarter trailing Atlanta by 8 points. The Dream were at home, and for most of the night, they had controlled the game. This wasn't some easy Fever victory where Clark dominated from the opening tip. Indiana had to fight its way back, and Clark became the player who helped make that comeback possible. She finished with 26 points and 9 assists, while Indiana outscored Atlanta 17-9 in the fourth quarter. The game eventually went to overtime, and the Fever pulled away for a 95-91 victory. Clark didn't even have a perfect shooting night. She made just 3 of her 10 three-point attempts. But that's exactly what made her performance interesting. When the jumper wasn't falling consistently, she found other ways to affect the game. She created opportunities, moved the offense, and kept Indiana alive when Atlanta was trying to close the door. Then came the possession everyone remembers. The game was tied, and Atlanta had a chance to win it in regulation. Ryan Howard's shot missed. Reese grabbed the offensive rebound and suddenly had another opportunity near the basket. One make could have changed everything. Instead, the putback missed. Atlanta got another chance, but Naz Hillman couldn't finish either. Regulation ended, and the game went to overtime. And that was when the internet took over. A camera caught Clark smiling shortly after the sequence. And almost immediately, fans began arguing about what that expression meant. Some interpreted it as Clark enjoying Reese's mistake. Others pointed out that a few seconds of video can't tell us what somebody is actually thinking. That distinction matters, because the moment became bigger than the game itself. Suddenly, people weren't talking about Atlanta's 17-9 fourth quarter collapse. They weren't talking about the Fever surviving on the road. They weren't even talking about Reese's 15 points and 14 rebounds. They were talking about the rivalry. And that's what makes Clark and Reese different from almost every other young player comparison in basketball. Their rivalry didn't start in the WNBA. It goes back to college. Reese became a national star at LSU. Clark became the face of Iowa's historic run. Their teams eventually met for a national championship. And the game became one of the